Hi, this is Kimberly Stamatelos, author of the book The Compassionate Lawyer, and I have the great privilege of being today with Cindy Gleason, a certified divorce financial analyst and certified financial planner from here in Iowa. Cindy is here to talk to us today about compassionate lawyering tips for working with clients around the issue of money. Cindy, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk about this little subject.
You know, there's a lot of initials behind your name. Could you first of all begin by telling our viewing audience a little bit about the credentials that you have and what all those initials stand for, and a little bit about the distinctions between those?
Sure. As a financial planner, the Certified Financial Planning designation is, of course, in our industry, much like what the passing the bar test would be for attorneys to become lawyers. And it's a 2-day exam that is very, very rigorous and tests specifically over the 5 areas of financial planning, which include things like retirement planning, risk management, estate planning, all those different areas that we have to show our expertise in. In addition to that, I also have the Chartered Financial Consultant designation, which is much like the CFP and is designed for the financial planning industry. The other part of my practice came about a few years ago as I earned my Certified Divorce Financial Analyst, or CDFA, designation. And that is utilizing the experience and the knowledge of what happens from the CFP and the CHFC exams, and knowledge as a financial planner for the last 24 years to determine how the assets can be divided equitably through the dissolution process. There's specific continuing education training that helps us analyze those intricacies of the IRS code that allow for the dissolution to be able to give some benefit to one side or the other, or both.
And then, of course, the other distinction or label that we hear sometimes is CPA.
Correct.
And tell us a little bit about what a CPA is and how that differs from some of these other distinctions you mentioned.
As the CPA is Certified Public Accountant, and they tend to, we've always kind of made it seem simple, as in they count. They count what the assets are now, they count what the taxes are now, all those different issues, which are important. The one thing that they do many times are business valuations, which we do not do. And they also do a lot of tax returns, which I've done in my practice. I don't do much tax return analysis or tax return preparation anymore, but I do a lot of tax analysis. And those kinds of things are still important, but they don't necessarily think forward for the divorcing party. They don't always look forward for the parties going forward in their lives, in their financial lives in the future. So that's the important part of the financial planning background that we have, to be able to move forward and kind of anticipate what we're looking at down the road in any sort of a distribution of the assets.
And of course, when we're talking about clients that have money outcomes or money issues, we're talking about certainly divorcing parties where they're splitting the assets. We're talking about people that receive a personal injury award or workers' compensation payments. We're talking about people that are in business and maybe selling a business, buying, selling a business, partnerships dissolving, estate planning. I mean, there's numbers everywhere we turn in the legal profession. And I know you've worked for a number of years with people involving numbers and money. And could you just tell our listening audience, our viewing audience, a little bit about what you find when clients are involved in issues pertaining to money?
Sure. I think one of the things that comes about relatively clearly after a few years, and I think it really hits home working in the divorce arena, is that what happens when those issues and decisions need to be made around money are that people have fear. They need to know that they're going to be okay after this, whatever this trauma is or whatever the issue is finished. They need to be sure that they can move on, still live, still survive, and without being able to look at those things in a way that makes sense to them, they really have a difficult time moving forward and making decisions.
And you've worked obviously with lawyers that are consulting with clients on these money issues, and do they typically recognize that their clients are in fear, or is that something that maybe lawyers are missing?
I think many times the client doesn't recognize that that's the emotion that drives them as well. They maybe can't articulate it as this is what I'm afraid of. Sometimes they can, but many times they don't even know that they're in fear. And so I think sometimes the lawyers would miss that if the client can't even see it.
So for lawyers that may be watching that want to move their practice more toward compassion, what are some tips or guidance you can give them in being aware and awake to the issues that are facing clients with regard to money?
I think sometimes it would be very beneficial if they would just kind of slow down, take a step back, try to put themselves in that position. How would I feel if I were in the position of this client? Would I automatically know on the other side of this event, am I going to be okay? And that so many times is the question the client needs answered. And if you can answer that, and if it creates some kind of peace of mind, the client can make a decision on that. And that's really where you need to get when you're making these decisions, going through a divorce or any sort of a change in your financial structure.
And what if the client isn't going to be okay? What if, for example, in a divorce, there's not enough assets to go around, or there's not enough alimony to be able to support both households? Or what about in a personal injury action, where maybe there's some comparative fault, and so the recovery is such that the client's not going to have enough to make ends meet? A lawyer that wants to be compassionate in that regard, what suggestion would you have for them?
I would suggest that they look at different alternatives that they maybe have not thought of before. Thinking outside the box sometimes can be really beneficial. Particularly in a divorce, many times you're building two households now out of possibly one income. And that becomes very difficult, particularly if children are involved. Things may not necessarily get to stay the same on the same status quo. We, of course, like to have people continue in the lifestyle that they used to be accustomed, but sometimes the income just will not support that. And, of course, in a time of very high unemployment, we can't always assume that someone can walk out and get a job and everything's going to be fine again. So think outside the box, utilize somebody that really understands the numbers and can maybe give you some ideas. It's great to develop a network of professionals that you can go to and say, have you ever come up with this kind of a problem? What might you do to resolve this?
One of the other things I know in working with you is that you are always come equipped with some technology to be able to show the numbers on the wall. And so we might be in a meeting on a case and you'll have everything flashed up on the wall. I know my clients really like that. Have you ever had any other feedback with regard to that process?
Almost every time I'm able to do this with a new lawyer in a case, and also the clients as well, they almost always say, particularly the lawyers, I'm going to tell everybody I know how beneficial it was to have the finances available and viewable so that the clients could see, and that relieved a little bit of their angst in making that decision because they could see some fairness. They did know that all the tax implications were addressed and all of the things have been thought through as well as they possibly can be about what's going to happen in the future. It just alleviates some stress because when you're looking at multiple kinds of assets, those clients can't think that way necessarily in their head. They can't put those all together in a pie chart. It would be nice if they could, but it's almost impossible for them to do as they make their decisions.
And I'm thinking that the investment for that sort of a process is not that substantial. I mean, a little projector, and while you have some more extravagant software, certainly even if you were using Excel and you had an Excel spreadsheet up on the wall and you could manipulate the numbers and show people. You know, one of the other things that I see happening with lawyers when I'm serving as a mediator is they will talk above the client's head. They will talk with the financial person or with the other lawyer about tax benefits or tax ramifications or what's an annuity versus what's this, or depreciation, standard straight line depreciation versus accelerated depreciation, and they're throwing all of this terminology out there. and the client's just sitting there quietly. Any other advice you might give to the conversation or the tone of the conversation? I mean, you talked about slowing down, but anything else based on your experience that you see that you could give guidance for to lawyers that are in those conversations with clients in the room?
I think the important thing is to talk to the client and watch their eyes. Not only is that great to help them really get the gist of what you're saying, but it's really important for you to see where's the deer in the headlight look, because you want to be sure that you catch that. Many times clients don't want to feel like they're making it's a bad question. It's a scary question, or I should know that and I don't. There are no dumb questions in this industry because everything is intertwined with everything else. And that's what's so complex about what we do, but we can make it so that it is much more understandable if we view the client as if they really need the education to go along with it, and they will then know that you really did a lot of thought on preparing this case and getting them ready for making that decision.
The last thing I'd like to touch on is the health of the lawyers themselves with regard to money. We have a lot of law students coming out of school now with hundreds of thousands of dollars of student debt. We have lawyers that are setting up shop without a lot of clientele. We have lawyers that are living from contingent fee recovery to contingent fee recovery, and so they may go for months or perhaps a year or longer without any kind of income coming in. And I know in law school they didn't teach us anything about money management or money skills or how to plan financially or even to do a budget. And in fact, what I'm finding in my work as a lawyer is that very few people in general are skilled in that regard. So to the lawyers themselves out there, for their own personal money, health, and well-being, what suggestions would you make for them to be awake and aware of?
I think one of the first things that needs to be done is that the attorney or the lawyer needs to think about how they need to live in terms of, do I need to look the part or do I need to be able to survive? And how does my income relate to that? It may be different in a big firm than a solo practitioner, and somehow along the way you have to make that decision. It's really, really important not to overspend on things that make you think you might be doing a great job for your practice or moving in that direction, and it looks really good, but it may be really a devastating issue for your financial peace. Also knowing that as a solo practitioner specifically, or in a small firm, you may be on a 1099, you may be just total income coming in. Don't forget that Uncle Sam is going to be at your door checking on how much you made that year. And it's really important to square up your income and your expenses on a month-by-month basis so you don't get behind the eight ball. Nothing's worse than getting to April 15th and owing $10,000 in taxes and not understanding why you're in that position. It's really important to save for that. It's really important to save for your retirement. As a solo practitioner and as a financial planner, I'm an independent contractor, I'm a solo practitioner. I have to be really conscious about saving for my own retirement because no one else is going to be there to do that. There isn't a partnership. There isn't somebody that's going to drop their practice in my lap and say, here, I really enjoy knowing you, and here it is. It's really important to plan. And certainly, if you're familiar with a financial professional anyway, ask them the questions.
You know, I know one of the things that I have done with the associates that I've had in my practice over the years is when they come to work for me, I will gift to them a meeting with you so that you can make them aware of these issues and talk to them about how to do some financial planning and set back for taxes if they're on a 1099 or something like that. So that's certainly compassionate lawyering at its finest for us seasoned lawyers to be able to mentor to these younger lawyers and get them from the very earliest part of their practice awake and aware to those types of issues. All of us need to make sure that we're planning and saving for retirement and doing some of these other things.
I think you'll find many times as well that a financial planner will be happy to maybe cut that fee or look at how they might make it reasonable for you to actually do some really good sound financial planning. And we do pro bono cases occasionally too. I mean, that's certainly not unheard of in our industry either.
Are there a couple of things that you see as our society as a whole probably are pretty unhealthy about money? And I know in a lot of the cases that I end up doing, everybody is leveraged and houses are upside down, and there's, you know, a lot of financial strain going on to people in general. Are there just some money management principles, some simple money management principles that would be things for all of us to kind of maybe take a look at?
Sure. I think one of the first things that you have to do is pay yourself first. Look at what your retirement needs are or your goals are. And you may not really know that early in your career, but at least be thinking, what can I do towards my retirement? Once you've acquired that issue, or at least got it down to something you feel like you can afford, then think about your taxes and be sure you have that set aside in a separate account so that you'll be ready for that tax liability when it comes, because I assure you it will come. Uncle Sam doesn't like to wait very long either for that. So it's really important. Those are two of the really big pieces, is not getting behind the 8 ball right off the bat. It's really important not to do that. Also then, think about seriously how you plan your debt, because that's one of the things that's most important as well. If you've got some major student loan debt and you need a new car, maybe you want to finance a later model used car to break away from that depreciation that you'd have to pay. But as you're thinking about that payment, I can encourage my financial planning clients, don't think about that payment as this is the minimum or the maximum payment that I can afford, and that's what I'm going to do. Think about your payment and get it to a position where you think, I can do at least $200 more a month on that than what I'm budgeting, so I'm okay with that payment. That way, if you have a tough month, you've got some wiggle room in that budget, and you've got a cash flow that works for you. It's much more pleasant to get through the month with some money at the end that you can throw towards your debt. Because if you think about that debt as being gone, you look at your cash flow and go, this is utopia.
It's funny, even just to hear you say the word cash flow. One of the things you taught me with clients is to talk not about budget, because budget implies that I'm restricted, oh my gosh, I have to suffer. But cash flow, where's that money going to come and how's it going to come in and go out? Seems to be more palatable. So even sometimes the words that we choose can help those clients in fear, or those clients that we're trying to bring along to embrace the concept of understanding money. It can help them a little bit more.
I think in those cases, especially divorce cases where you have a higher income level for the couple previous to the action, I think that if you talk about budgeting, I think you're talking a negative term to whatever spouse has to come up with their budget, so to speak. I think cash flow analysis always makes it seem like something really trendy, something a little bit more palatable and fun than budgeting. There's not much fun in that word.
And Cindy and I have a war story to tell, in that one of the first clients that I brought Cindy in on to talk to that particular client about their cash flow situation, we said, okay, you're going to have to go back and fill out what you have to, what you're paying on a monthly basis on each of these expenses. And my client ended up checking themselves into a mental hospital that next day. So to never underestimate the idea that clients that are being brought along to understand money can really have some strong emotional reactions.
That's true. In the financial industry, even without the divorce issues being something that's more pressing and more destructive to their psyche at that point, even in the financial planning industry, we have to really be cognizant of what things might be going on behind the scenes that we aren't thinking about or don't realize with those clients. That's really important to know. There may be cases of, some alcohol abuse, there may be some domestic abuse, all those different kinds of pieces that we had no idea was there need to be at least thought about in the backs of our minds and know that there's some wound somewhere in this case. Even in the best financial planning cases, it happens.
Well, in conclusion, there's a lot of compassion that we can use in working with clients around money, and certainly having compassion for ourselves by planning for our retirement, being awake and aware as to money, making sure that we don't go out and buy things just because we can, making sure that we don't fall prey to the trappings of the legal profession and having to look the part of the big fancy lawyer. And Cindy, I'd like to tell you, thank you so much for your guidance today. And would you be able to tell our folks out there how they might find out more or about you and your practice?
Sure. I have two separate practices. My financial planning practice is Gleason Financial Group, and you can find my website address at www.gleason, G-L-E-A-S-O-N, financialgroup.com. And my divorce practice is quite separate, but also is on the website of www.gleasonresourcegroup.com. One of the things that I did not see coming when I named the company was being a resource to lawyers. And many times I get lawyers calling me asking for referrals of business valuation experts or mental health professionals. So it's really kind of been amazingly a psychic thing that became the name, and it's actually became fruition. So
excellent,
yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you again for your time.
Thank you.
From the Compassionate Lawyer Institute, thank you so much for watching.